Elimination.
Are we rolling?
We're rolling.
We're getting after it?
Yeah, we're getting after it.
Welcome.
Hey, Soren. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been talked about for a bit, so I'm really happy we just finally manifested it into existence. So let's just cut right to the chase.
We'll get into it.
Yeah.
So for the viewers, today we have a team world champion, a 2004 and 2012 Olympian, 01 NCAA individual national champion, 4-time All-American, a U.S. national champion, a 10-plus time team national champion, 2-time zonal champion, Grand Prix bronze medalist, World Cup silver medalist, the first American to make a top 8 at World Championships in men's epee ever, and the first American to make top 8 at the Olympics in men's epee since 1956, and my coach, Soren Thompson.
Woo! Thanks, guys.
Welcome. Was that overwhelming or underwhelming?
It was great. Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to walk down memory lane with a little parade of results from the past.
Yeah, it was like a spark notes of your whole career. Do you remember it all?
Pieces.
Yeah. Well, typically, I think the way that Steve and I run this and the way that we're going to run it today is, an offshoot of that is we'll just ask you a few questions about your life. And we want our audience who doesn't know you to just get a chance to meet Soren Thompson. Where'd you start? How'd you find fencing? And who are you?
A few questions there. Well, I think what's unusual about me from a fencing context is I grew up in San Diego. And San Diego, certainly at that time, and even for the most part since, it's just not really a place where there were a lot of fencers. I didn't grow up in an environment where there was really a clear kind of string of athletes who were older, who were having the kind of results that I might aspire to. And so there was a lot of things that I was figuring out for myself along the way. And I had really good fortune along the way to have great coaches and other people who, kind of advised and helped me in a lot of different ways, as I'm sure, you guys and pretty much everybody in the sport does. But I think that I'm an outlier. I don't think there's been another U.S. athlete from San Diego who's been on, national teams and things like that. So my history from the start was a little bit strange. And basically I took a class at UCSD that was available for kids. And my mom had a friend who knew the coach at UCSD and recommended that, if I wanted to try it, I could. And I did a lot of sports growing up. So I think one thing I had over maybe some people who are really good fencers or had a great access to fencing when they were younger is I was a good athlete. And I took that class a couple times and they said, you sort of outgrew that, so take the adult class. So I was 10 years old, basically fencing against college kids taking their first class. And because I'd done a couple kids classes, I could sort of hold my own a little bit against some of them. And it kind of went from there. And then eventually I was able to do some optional training with the team itself. When it wasn't their official training, they would do mostly like running outside and things like that, some footwork. And so I started training with people who were older than me, and they were obviously a lot better than me. But, they didn't really treat me like a little kid. I was able to just sort of get after some hard training, and my, fencing technique and everything was pretty rough. But, I had a good foundation and some other things that were useful later.
So I vaguely remember you saying at some point that there was another sport that you were pretty good at. What was your other potential path that didn't get explored?
Well, the coach who eventually came to UCSD and let me do some of that more serious training kind of with the college kids and stuff like that had been a modern pentathlete. And my sister rode horses, and she did jumping with those horses. So I did that a little bit. I was a competitive swimmer, pretty good swimmer. San Diego's pretty tough for swimming, Southern California, but I was not bad. And I, could run. So sort of I already had a decent foundation and, 4 sports, and I could, go after those and pick up shooting and maybe do monopentathlon. And things didn't really work out for that. It was just hard to kind of liaise with U.S. pentathlon and sort of, figure out how all that would work. But I think that was the main other sport. I was also a pretty successful like junior sailor in like little boats in San Diego, and so different things like that. So yeah, I think every sport I've done has added something to, how I think about competition or, what I bring to, fencing in a different way. But those were different ones, and they just sort of dropped off along the way as I got more and more serious about fencing.
Checks out. Yeah, that's sailing. That's interesting.
Yeah, I can just imagine a little Soren now sailing through the waves.
Did you have a sailing outfit?
Just need good sunglasses and a hat and some shorts. You're going to get wet sometimes. So, yeah.
Nice. So I guess let's jump forward a little bit. You eventually did all these amazing things that Stephen had brought up. And we want to know, and we ask all of our guests this, as we were telling you earlier, there is a moment at which you must have had this switch flip in your head from having something be this enjoyable class where you're showing some potential, with just being a good athlete, and then you're starting to fence with older kids. And then all of a sudden, at some point in your life, and it could have been gradual, but you're doing these amazing things. Was there a tipping point or a moment where you had to consciously decide to go all in on this? Because you're still involved in the fencing community today. It's been your life's work, right? So is there a moment you remember where it became more serious to you or more real?
I think we probably all have, several of those. I mean, I've had many twists and turns in my career, and it's been long. But a few come to mind. One was the first tournament I entered. I think it was the first tournament I entered. It was actually an unrated foil event. When I was young, it was pretty rare for kids to just do epee. So I was a foil fencer when I was young. And it was one that I could compete in San Diego. And it was all, just unrated people. So it was all adults. I was the youngest person in it. And I won. And I was, I think, 11 years old. And I had a lot of like hard fights with some people who were, they were a lot older and they were bigger, stronger, adults. And just getting through that day and being successful. It was also dry, which is just something no one even knows about anymore. So it was a really unusual format, this kind of antiquated thing. I did start kind of on the cusp of when, the sport changed a lot in this country. And, I was a part of, I think, a very pivotal Olympics later in 2004. But, I saw a lot of changes in the time that I've been involved in the sport. So I was fencing that event like they used to do, many decades before, even like 100 years ago at this point. And we just don't really see competitions like that anymore. So it is a little bit interesting to think back on that experience. But I think that made me realize that I enjoyed competing a lot and that I would like to keep going with the sport. So having a result like that, an experience like that when you're really young is very motivating.
From sabers speed to epee patience, foils finessing, quiet foundations.
Ari, recently I've had to come face to face with a terrible truth. I am officially getting older. My body is not as spry and young as it once was, and I've had to shift my focus to keep fencing into things like recovery, warming up, stretching, like things that I never could have conceived of when I was younger. And if you're listening to this and you're younger than me, it's around the corner for you. Now, here at Direct Elimination, we have something that can help. Our partner on this podcast, Myo, M-Y-O, has locations in New York, Los Angeles, Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto. So if you're a listener of this podcast in any of those cities or near any of those cities, be sure to go ahead and check them out. Myo is modern physical therapy to future-proof your body. They are opening people's eyes to how their body can move, and I am one of those people, proud to say. With Myo's help, I've been able to recover from multiple injuries, and I've gained a better sense of how my body moves and how I'm able to interact in space, and it's honestly helped my fencing a bit too. If you're interested in booking a session in modern physical therapy, use code DIRECTMYO100 for $100 off your first session. Again, that is DIRECTMYO100 for $100 off your first session at Mayo. Ari, I have some sad news. I'm retiring my practice mask. But you want to know the good news? I got a new pre-air mask. Life is good when you get some brand new pre-air equipment. It fits a little better, it shines a little brighter, and you know what? I've always believed in not just fencing, but any athletics, right? You look good, you feel good, you perform good. So if you want to look good on the strip, be sure to go buy yourself some pre-air equipment at preairusa.com. Trying to think where I want to go from there, but that's interesting.
Balls in your court.
No.
Well, I can share another one if you want.
Share away.
Maybe
This
I'll-
is your
share
time. The more you share, the less I talk, and that's usually a good sign.
Yeah, if it helps. So I did start training up in LA, and that was a recommendation of some coaches and people I knew, in San Diego. And it's like, if you want to keep going with the sport, you do have to access a better training environment that was really available in San Diego. So I started going up there, and I had a lot of support from my parents, especially my mom, to drive. It's a 2-hour drive each way, and we'd kind of go up once a week or so, kind of whatever we could, and then stay at my grandparents' place, which was like an hour. So we'd drive up 2 hours, like I'd fence as much as I could, drive down an hour, spend the night, and then try to go back, like for some more training the next day, whenever I could. But at a certain point, the coaches up there, is a very unusual place to train called Westside Fencing Center, and a lot of coaches who we know now, because they've had a lot of success since then, a lot of international success with their athletes, a lot of Olympians and things like that. It was just a grouping of many kind of Hall of Fame type superstars from the 60s and 70s who were sort of winding down their coaching careers in Southern California. Guys like Michael DeSaro Sr., who was my coach, Ed Richards, both of those multi-time national champions, Olympians, and it was like the last coaching stop for them. They were in like semi-retirement, chilling in LA basically, and then there were young coaches, international guys like Daniel Costin and Gago Demirchin, who later was my coach too, and Misha Itkin was his first coaching location, I think, in the States. And so he actually took a group of us, there were 3 of us, I think, from LA, who went out to watch the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And it was exciting to be in the stands at the games and to see that. I think that was the moment when I thought that, that would be a good goal for me to have and to try to go for the Olympics. So it is, I think, important to not just have, an idea I know conceptually or, what the Olympics might be. I've heard of it, but, the more you can make it kind of concrete and understand what it is, it's helpful because you can say, I can, shoot for that. So that was the first time. So it was really exciting as a 15-year-old to be in the stands there and, see that level of competition and feel like, if you train hard and really go for it, it might be possible.
Was 96 a Kolobkov win?
96 was Beketov won. It was just a surprise. But I actually was a foil fencer at that time, and so I had never fenced epee in 96, so I didn't see the epee competition.
Who won foil in 96?
Shorter Italian fencer who was also a bit of a surprise, incredible footwork. I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
It's okay.
Puccini, maybe, or something like that. Yeah.
I'll find him.
But I did watch that event. And I think we might have seen women's foil there too, but saw a lot of, top guys, win and lose throughout the foil competition. And then we saw the final as well.
Nice. So then
and I think,
yeah, you're right. Alessandro Puccini.
Okay.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So at what point did you decide to switch fully to epee? And what led you to do that switch?
Well, it was an unusual thing. I was doing both weapons for a while and pretty successful. And I think that was helpful for me being, again, from San Diego, kind of having a limited budget to get to competitions, being pretty focused on, academics and other things. And even for a period of this time, even thinking that I might do pentathlon. So I was still swimming competitively through most of my teens. I just didn't go to the number of different competitions like I think is common for young fencers to do now. I think it might be too much for a lot of, cadets and things like that. But I did target events that had cadet and junior, for example, or junior senior. So I would fence all 4 days of a competition. I would fence each junior, senior, foil, and epee, for example. Or my first JOs, they had more age groups than they do now. I qualified for and fenced in under 13, under 15, under 17, and under 20. They don't have all those same age groups now. So I was a 12-year-old fencing against the, the college kids and like the under 20 and stuff. So for me, it was just all experience. And at a certain point, it was pretty common for me at a cadet event to win, 3 or 4 medals, make 3 or 4 finals, or, make the podium on like 3 events or something like that. So it was, looking back on it, that's kind of a crazy volume to do, but it's a lot of good practice to get, just competitive reps in. And it was kind of efficient. So they didn't have to travel every weekend. So I would sort of pick and choose like that. And then you asked about switching. I was successful in both of the weapons. And the 2 national coaches at that time were Aladar Kogler in epee and Simon Gershon in foil. And Aladar made a bit of a controversial decision, but the budgets were extremely limited, just like a handful of $1,000. But he would give the juniors who were good at that time, and they were pretty much me, Jan Viviani, and Seth Kelsey, enough money to go to like 2 World Cups or something like that. And it was cheaper to travel back then. So that would be like $1,200 maybe for the year or something like that. It left very little money for seniors and things like that. But we weren't super successful at the senior level at that time. So he's like, I'm just going to shift this money towards the juniors. So I could go to some of the junior World Cups in epee. And I asked Simon kind of the same. And he said, there's no funding for you. So I started competing in more junior epee World Cups and doing better in those. And so my first, or my second to last year as a cadet, I came very close actually to making both teams. I was, I think, 4th in epee and 5th in foil. So I didn't go to either. And then the next year I made the cadet team in epee, started to get this funding, and it was like, it's hard to do all the World Cups and all of them.
Right.
So I did a handful of foil World Cups over the years, like sometimes when they were adjacent, like there was a junior epee tournament in France, and then there was like a junior foil tournament in France the next weekend. I'd be like, I'll do both. So I did that a couple times, which was interesting. But in foil, they have to kind of know you. You're not going to get calls. Sometimes I was the only American there. It was kind of frustrating to be over there. So eventually it was just like, I'll just do epee. And then when my first full year as a junior, I think I fenced in 4 junior World Cups. I think I made the top 16 in all of them and 3rd in one. And I was like #1 junior. And it was like, there was good funding at that time. And just, that's that. So
it just made sense. You wouldn't say that it was an emotional decision. Like, this could shatter my whole universe here. Do you like foil more?
No.
Okay. Do you like epee more?
Definitely at this point.
Okay.
I don't think the change in like the timing and the way foil is called now, like I'm not like passionate about watching. I think epee actually is more interesting, at least, how I dove into it. And maybe if I'd stayed in foil, I'd feel differently. But just the fact that you have, all of the complexity, you have many different target areas. You have sort of like a more forward target. You have deeper target. You even have the back. You have like, head to toe. You just have all this different stuff that you can do. I find that to be interesting.
Yeah. And it's more objective for a viewer or an athlete or a referee.
I really don't. I think most people would agree that one of the main weaknesses of fencing is the subjectivity of the refereeing and how it's particularly bad in saber. So I feel for saber athletes, right? Each athlete can feel they got the touch, or at least they act like it, and then the referee throws it out. Like there really just should be one thing, right? And in epee, we have a lot of controversial calls too. There's no question, turning the back, this or that. And it's remarkable how many bouts do turn on something like that. But it's not an easy event to referee, but the objectivity of it, I feel very happy actually to have been in a sport that had that, because I was cheated against a couple times in my career, as a team, part of the U.S. team. But it would be way worse in the other weapons.
Yeah, totally agreed. You saved my universe, because I was worried that you might have said foils better.
No, all the weapons are hard. Everyone's training hard, and the level is super elite. I do think those other weapons, it's a little bit more like who and are your actions being called more in this way. Everyone's trying to copy like the person who's successful, this and that. The fact that so many things can be successful in epee, even stuff that's counterintuitive or seems wrong or whatever, is part of what makes it really interesting, and people can get really creative, and there are creative, hardworking people all over the world. So, there's really no right answer, and I think it's much more difficult to do that in the other weapons.
Yeah, absolutely.
It engages the big thinkers. So.
Or the not so thinkers.
Yeah, I guess there's a route for everyone. Anyways.
So then moving forward, because we were talking, and I believe the last date we had was like 96, 97 time frame-ish. So then transitioning out of the cadets, juniors, and these other age groups that don't exist anymore, you went to Princeton. So what was your decision like going to Princeton? Why did you end up choosing there as opposed to any other school? And how, also, what was that transition like to go from the West Coast to the East Coast and then pretty much stay here for a significant portion of your life since?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. The New York Athletic Club was the really top place to train in men's epee. And it is kind of interesting because at that time, late 90s, we had more going on, I would say, on the West Coast than we probably do right now in terms of really top-ranked national level guys. We had, Seth was there doing really well. Cody was coming on. I'd been ranked pretty well for a few years. Eric Hansen was out there, and a handful of other people who had made world teams or were going to World Cups. So there was a little more, but it was spread out. Some of those guys were up in Oregon, and then we had some guys in the Bay Area, and we had a couple guys in Southern California who were all older. But looking ahead to competing a lot internationally while I was in school, was pretty clear that being on the East Coast and cutting down that travel time would be an advantage. So I knew a lot of people, for example, at Stanford, and it would have been an awesome place to be in school, no question. But I just really knew there would be ridiculous kind of friction getting to the airport and all the way over to Europe or whatever. So I was pretty clear that I would want to train out of the New York Athletic Club, which I had been doing kind of off and on trips for years already. And I had a lot of friends at the club, and I had trained at the club since I was, 15 or 16 or something like that. So New York was a clear place. And then I really only looked at Columbia and Princeton, and it was a hard choice between those two schools. I was actually admitted to both. But I just really liked the idea of not being in the city forever. I sort of thought that I would wind up in New York after graduating, and it just seemed like a lot of that all in a row. I wanted a different experience for a while before that happened, and I really liked Princeton. So and I liked my time there.
Who was on the team with you at Princeton, at least on the epee side, and who's the coach that brought you?
At that time, it was somebody named Michel Sebastiani, who is very known, I think, from a little bit of an earlier generation. He had come over from France, and had coached at a number of schools, Cornell, Princeton. He'd been in Texas for a while, or he'd coached Tim Glass and some people that had really good junior results. He had been, I think, a coach with the U.S. team at the '84 games and some other things like that, some national teams. So in epee, he was well known, but probably a generation kind of before the athletes that I was fencing with. He'd been at universities for a while, and you're not really developing new athletes at that time. But very classical French fencing master. Interesting guy. He'd been in the French Foreign Legion, so he was just a very disciplined, hardworking person. And I hit it off pretty well with him, and I was really interested to learn. Not that it kind of took over my fencing stylistically, like traditional French fencing, were really classical French fencing, let's say, but it was really interesting to understand it, and that being the foundation of obviously many French fencers, but many other schools throughout the U.S. or the world also. But he is also well known for having been the primary coach for Maya Lawrence, who was a medalist in 2012, of course, and some other good fencers. So on the team with me at that time, were mostly like quite accomplished and like pretty solid New Jersey high school epee fencers. There weren't, when I started, a lot of like nationally ranked epee guys, but Ben Solomon came after I was there, so we were kind of the main two for a little while, and he obviously had a pretty solid, even some international results, and then domestic, of course, too. And then Tommy Hermy was on the team with me as well for 1 year.
I didn't realize.
He was a freshman when I was
Shout out Tommy.
a super
Shout out Tommy.
senior,
duper senior,
because
yeah.
I took a year off before I graduated for the '04 games. And so then when I came back and graduated, he was on the team with me.
Nice. That was probably really good for him to get that exposure to you as well at post-Olympics and whatnot.
And his older sister was on the team with me when I started. And then she graduated a year or two in, I forget. And then he was on the team. And then his younger brother came after. So they had three of them that went and were all successful epee fencers.
It's a fencing family. His father is also a fencer. Risto Hermy.
Risto Hermy, three-time. They didn't let freshmen fence NCAAs back in the day. Three-time NCAA champion for NYU and Olympic medalist in team modern pentathlon for Finland.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Pretty cool. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I didn't know those results. I just knew Risto was around because I grew up in Texas.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just the Hermes were a name. Hermes and the Hurleys.
Yeah. They're both trained together, pentathlon.
Yeah. They're very close in name. And actually, I passed Sebastiani Academy yesterday. The club is still in place. It
was in
exists.
Jersey?
In Jersey. Dasha's family and I went to Princeton yesterday to catch a play at McCarter Theater.
Oh, yeah, right next to the university, yeah.
It was really great, but we passed Sebastiani and her parents had never heard of it. And they said, "What's that?" I said, "Actually, Soren and Jack went to Sebastiani." They said,
correct.
"Who's Jack?" I said, "My friend who's a lawyer. Don't worry about it. I can't tell you anymore."
And so that's when he was coaching at a different university. So
Nice.
yeah.
That's cool.
Exactly.
So Princeton, take off a gap year, and then you graduate. And at that point, you were...
Well, you skipped an Olympics. All right, get to
I
where you're
did
going.
skip
Sorry.
in the Olympics. Maybe we should just talk about the Olympics. No, that was a really great moment as well. I wanted to go more to like the life story, but we should actually talk about the Olympics and we'll pull it into everything.
All right.
That was a great catch, Stephen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's what I'm here
So
for.
that was your first Olympics, but not your last. And it was a great showing, as you mentioned, and we mentioned, or maybe just we mentioned. But regardless, you were the first American to make an 8 since the 50s in our event, men's epee. And to get to the top 8, you have to win a series of bouts. So you didn't just go to the Olympics, you won bouts at the Olympics. You got to do it in front of the crowd, the pressure, the spectacle of all of it. And, clearly you said you took a gap year. You know what it's like to train for an event like that and sort of not put your life on hold, but refocus your entire, existence sort of towards this thing. And I guess 2 questions. One, what was it like at the Olympics? You know, what was that experience like getting wins at the Olympics and making it further into the tournament, and then even, you know, missing the ultimate goal, which is medaling? And on top of that, how do you feel that that shaped the next few years of your life, or even the rest of your life? You know, the experience that you had from that, how did that carry with you into what came next?
Well, yeah, I was 23 at the Olympics, so somewhat young for a men's epee fencer. I think most are getting their best results a little bit older than that. But it really had been my goal, and I had, I think, managed not just that season for qualification, which was pretty tough. We had a lot of people getting good results and going really hard for that team. It was also a transition time internationally. There had not existed before that Olympics team World Cups. So it was actually the first Olympics that teams qualified for through team world ranking. So it was kind of an extra burden, and sort of thing that everybody was understanding was, how do teams qualify and kind of manage that, and what is team fencing? And, you know, a lot of teams were sort of figuring that out. Some were better than others, but up until that time, there had really only been team championships like the Olympics or World Championships or European Championships or national championships. And so you would only get, you know, 1 or 2 of those a year, and it was mostly thought of as just a collection of individual, you know, bouts sort of strung together. And so that was an interesting and formative experience, I think, not just for me, but my teammates, who were Seth Kelsey and Cody Mattern, and Jan Viviani was the alternate on that team. But yeah, you know, putting your life on hold, which is what it is. You make a big commitment on that. I had really shaped things around this objective. For example, my junior year, so the year before that at Princeton, in my second semester, I put all my classes on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so I could travel Thursday after my last class, fly to a World Cup, arrive Friday, fence Saturday, Sunday, return Monday, and do it all again. And so it was a really, really tough and busy, you know, few months while I was doing both those things to the best of my ability. But that set me up to qualify for that World Championships. It was my goal to compete well there, and I made the 8 in Havana before, so I knew that was a strong result that, you know, I could carry through for that qualification period, and it worked out that way. And then at the Olympics, you know, every path is hard. Just being there is hard. But I think I managed it with the, you know, help of different people, of course. But I think I had, you know, sort of a good plan for it. My first bout was against Peresina Strosa, who was the like a sneakily accomplished Chilean fencer. I think he qualified for 4 Olympics or something like that. He came through the Western Hemisphere and was just a really tough competitor. I'd actually lost to him in an unusual bout actually in a World Cup final in Argentina earlier that year, but there were some strange things that happened down there. So I didn't feel like I should have lost that bout, and, you know, I was pretty ready for it, but I was losing and just decided, kind of, my main memory is I just decided I kind of like had to win. So I piled up a few touches and then was able to hold him off at the end. But the really main bout I had there was against Alfredo Rota, who was ranked number 1 in the world. He was the favorite to win gold there. And he had just an incredible run to take one of the European zone qualification spots, individual spots, after Italy had won the previous 2 team Olympics and would have been considered almost a shoo-in to qualify through team. Their team actually faltered, and it looked like none of them were going to qualify. And then he just put like 6 medals in a row together. I mean, it was just crazy. He was just winning everything, like practically unbeatable for a couple months in the season, and took over the number 1 ranking in the world and carried that into the games. And I think I fenced that bout, you know, really, really well, and ended up beating him 15-13 with some kind of bold tactical moves and things like that towards the end of the bout. no videos exist. They weren't televising these events back in the day. And then
I'll take your word for it.
yeah, no,
You're a
I
trustworthy
remember
guy.
that about fairly well, at least kind of the key moments. But then and then I drew Kolobkov, who was the defending Olympic champion, and I think probably didn't have the best plan. I was a little surprised to go, be at that point, and kind of do all that. And so I know I could have fenced that bout better. I fought pretty hard, but ended up losing 15, maybe 11 or something like that. And then in team, I fenced pretty well too, but we wound up losing to France. And then I subbed myself out at a certain point so that Jan could be an Olympian on the backside of the 8. And we ended up 6th.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was kind of the Olympics there. Were other questions, but
No, I mean, that was awesome. And I think the follow-up was...
It was just asking how that informed sort of your life decisions post first Olympics, and I guess reframing.
Yeah.
Like you had to go back to college after that. What was that like? You had done this such an intense thing. What was it like to come back as an Olympian, and you had... Because you're still a human being, you're still a student, you're brought back down. Not that there's an up and down, but it sort of has you get grounded in this shared experience again after doing this thing that's a very rare experience. And how did that inform? What was that like?
Well, I was really happy to have something as important and in some ways structured to come back to. I think a lot of people after an Olympics, even a very successful, maybe even especially a successful Olympics, like a gold medal or something like that, which obviously I didn't, even become like the runner-up or whatever, but it was still a very successful Olympics for me. So I was mostly, happy with how I'd fenced and all that. But, a lot of people come in and they're kind of like, what's next, and that can be really hard, I think, for athletes. It's a common thing. So I had a plan for what was happening after. I was excited to go back for my senior year. At Princeton, you more or less have there's some exceptions, but everyone writes a senior thesis. So it's a daunting, endeavor, right? You're taking classes, but you're also working really hard on your thesis and things like that. So I had a lot to get into. It was a little hard to dive back into the fencing season. Let's just put it that way. I had a really fun time, and you have a little bit more like independent work. You have fewer classes because you're working on your thesis. So it was a nice, I think, environment to come back to. A lot of the people who are my better friends and who I knew for 3 years had graduated. So, that was a little bit tough, but you kind of meet some new people and have a good time. So that was all fine. But it was a little hard to kind of come back from the Olympics and be like, oh, we're doing, preseason fencing stuff for NCAAs coming up in, March of next year. And it's like, I need a little more time before I'm diving right into that. And I had like some little minor injuries and things like that. So I was a little slow to get going, but I still had an all right season and finished third at NCAAs later that year. So,
nice.
All that was fine. And I always liked fencing on the team and doing what I could to help the team win and all that. But yeah, it was actually, I think, a really good thing to, have the years work out the way they did.
Yeah. That's funny you say that, because Ari and I took a gap year. And our gap year, the fencing did not go well. So I felt like the biggest piece transitioning back was actually the school piece. Like it was a lot harder to kind of, after not doing anything with my brain for a year, it was way harder for me to like jump back into the school piece of it rather than the fencing. But we also didn't have that the Olympics to train for and compete at. And
we also had COVID. It was
the
COVID.
Yeah.
I came back. I was excited for school. Yeah, I mean, I have more in the tank, but I want Steven. I promised Soren you would grill him.
Well, so there is a piece that I'm very excited to get into, because now we've spoken about your college experience, the Olympics within that.
Start over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the piece that I've really wanted to get into is you've had a very interesting professional career. And interesting is, I think, the right word to describe it, because I still don't have all the pieces of it. And we might not get all the pieces today, but I think you have sort of at least in what I've gathered, like a non-traditional professional career, and you've done a lot of interesting things. And so I guess my question is like, how have you gotten into some of this stuff, and why take the sort of the path that you've taken since college over something maybe like your typical, not 9 to 5, but your typical work for large company X, get your bank, get out. Yeah, we'll just start with that, I guess.
Well, I don't know that it's always been like the long-term plan. Things kind of go the way they go. But certainly fencing has informed some of that. And, for better or worse, I did have objectives that were kind of unmet from the '04 games. And so I really felt like I could reach a higher peak, and I had a good Olympics. I liked the experience. I'd had good results. I'd had, my first, medals and finals at major World Cups and stuff going into that process, and kind of in that, quad leading up to it. And I knew that I'd be 27 at the next Olympics, like very much in, like a prime for competing well. So I wanted to structure something that would give me the ability to train hard. And so I did think that I might, have a traditional kind of finance type career. And I worked for a little while for Merrill Lynch, actually, right out of school. And I think that would have been fine. But, in that industry, and, maybe even more so at that time, there was just like a crazy FaceTime element. So even if I didn't have anything to do, I had to just sit there, and I would want to get to training and all that. It was just really frustrating. And I didn't think that was probably the long-term, course that would work best for me. So I cobbled together for a while the ability to basically like fence and do, some, things that I could support myself with as I traveled. And there, if you, fence well enough at that time and got results, you could get some funding and things like that. So, so that's what I did for a while with, really the objective of trying to be at my best and compete hard in the '08 games. But I had a really kind of freak and horrible injury the year before the Olympics that affected that a lot. And so, I think the plan wasn't that bad for what that goal was, but it didn't really work out because of the injury. And so I took a job at a startup that was kind of exciting, and I worked with a couple close friends. Actually, Jan, who I mentioned earlier, an Olympic teammate, was at that company, and it had been founded by David Rosenberg, who was a NYEC fencer, and it was a pretty interesting technology. It got highlighted by some big publications and different things like that. It was a clean tech technology, and so I started there, and that actually was, I think, a good fit for my goals. And I liked the idea of doing something entrepreneurial and kind of learning this, unusual industry, which I worked with a lot of architects and engineers and contractors and things like that. So I did that for a while, for a number of years, and I eventually at that company developed their international business, and I really liked that. I was developing relationships with companies all over the world and traveling a lot, which I had a lot of experience doing competing, and so I think that was a good fit, and we were pretty successful in nurturing those relationships. And I liked, going in as a kind of a technical expert who could help people understand our product, support them, and then manage them from there. And so we built up this big international distribution network that was kind of new for the company. It was quite successful. And then I decided to go to grad school. So I went to get an MBA at Columbia. And so it was sort of a shifting of gears. I thought that wasn't what I would kind of do forever. So those were a couple kind of pivot points for me. But I think aspects of that company And that experience working at a early stage startup was exciting. So I like the idea of, wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things and having your creativity and ability to problem solve and so forth, running, a business division or something like that and kind of building it up. I like that. And at the age that I was, that would be harder to do at a big company. I think I would have been more frustrated. But, maybe I would have made more money. I don't know. Maybe it would have worked out. I don't know. So you just sort of do what you do.
And you were 27 at this time, roughly?
When I was injured, I was 26, and then we fell short as a team, just short, qualifying for that Olympics. And then I worked there for a little while, and then I ended up going to grad school and finishing that when I was 35, so some years later.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So your late 20s and early 30s were spent working this job and training, right?
Well, I did not think that I would be able to, after I got injured, so what I did was I completely tore my right hamstring.
Is this the horrible game accident?
Yeah, effectively. I was at the training center in Colorado Springs. It was a really hard injury to compete through and train through. So trying to recover from that while also performing. And it's basically the biggest muscle in your body that's just been completely, ruptured. It was initially misdiagnosed. So I don't know if I'd had the correct diagnosis that I would have even gone for the cycle. But they just started rehabbing me, and I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing that happened out there at the training center. But it was a very hard year, and it was just so much maintenance on my body just to be able to walk, honestly. So competing was hard, and I was like, I just can't keep doing this. So I stopped fencing for several years. I just didn't really think that it was feasible to do really anything else and compete at that level. Just because of the amount of time that I needed to recover, and it was very costly. I was running around for different kinds of active release therapy. My leg would get all seized up, and I would not be able to really walk. And then I'd go see these guys, and they would just release all the muscles and attachments in my hip, and I'd be like, oh, now I can walk again, cool. And it was just over and over and over. So it was just this huge burden on just doing anything. So competing was hard. So I stayed active. I was playing a lot of badminton at the club at that time. I was still lifting. So I liked being active, and every now and then I would fence, and I would do really well in practice or whatever, but it's kind of it's just sort of an irrelevant thing, and I just don't really do this anymore, at that level. And then at a certain point, I guess this wasn't really the question, but
no, this is exactly what we want to know, though. It wasn't. These are you're hitting the follow-up questions. Like I said, the more you share, the less I talk, Soren. You're doing great.
I think at a certain point, the Canadian team were here. A bunch of people were here before maybe Worlds or something one year, and I was training, and I just beat everybody, and I just felt good. I was like, oh, maybe I will fence again or something like that. I will see. And then they announced that the 2012 games wasn't going to have team men's epee, which was disappointing, but in a way it was sort of an easier process for me because, being involved with the team and all that stuff wasn't going to be necessary. I could just do my own thing, and it just wouldn't really matter for anybody else. If I was doing well in competitions, if I was taking somebody's spot or this or that, it was just I could just do my own thing. And I did kind of look around at who was in New York and kind of talked about some things that were on my mind with fencing, and people just didn't really get it. So, it was sort of reluctantly, I decided that I'd coach myself, and I just started kind of doing things and trying out some ideas that I had largely around the knowledge that I knew I was just really physically limited from what I had been. I had been very athletic. I had been able to do kind of everything, and now I had this leg that was a big problem. So, is it possible and to compete well if you have a physical limitation that's really significant? And if so, like, what is that? So it was really just sort of diving more from a conceptual level into that, and then, training around these ideas. So I just, trained myself. I was living close to the New York Athletic Club, and I would walk by it on my way to the subway to go to work. I'd just get up early. I'd go there. I'd do footwork. Try out different things. I thought of myself as sort of an experiment. I had like some hypotheses, and I would just sort of try stuff around that, work through it, and then I would go to work. And then on the way back, I'd stop again and either fence or lift or do other stuff. And I was, training twice a day and working really hard. And I was not sure what would happen, but it was kind of like, let's see. And then I started competing a little bit, and it went quite well. So in the end, had actually my best results, I would say. I think I fenced my best. I had other injuries that popped up that really limited kind of the time that I was healthy and competing that well. But did qualify for the 2012 games. We had the success of the 2012 World Championship, which was awesome.
If you had come to yourself at that moment as today's Soren and gotten to speak to, that must have been 2009, 2010, when you were still juggling with this idea of coming back, and you would have told him the way that your career would have played out, like knowing how it ended up going after that, how do you think you would have reacted?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think that one of the main things that is just different about how I approached the sport from that point forward is it just was much more about the challenge of, developing a new way of thinking about the sport. It was certainly grounded and influenced by, a lot of incredible people who I've known in fencing. I think that I probably have worked with as a personal coach at a certain point or something like that, more coaches than almost anybody. Having come from the West Coast and then university and then through the New York Athletic Club, or multiple coaches there at different times, and then just a lot of people. And I often didn't really have a set coach. So, I would just, work with people in different ways. And a lot of people don't have that kind of flexibility with, the arrangements they have with their coaches and just how they do their training. So obviously different ideas and things like that. But it, what became more important to me than the results was just kind of like what you do, how you do it, kind of the process. And so once I came around to that, the results, they take care of themselves if your process is good. The main thing, like if I would have been able to go back, was I just, trained so hard, and I didn't have a lot of access to resources that, I wound up having injuries, and it's really hard to kind of back off in the middle of those qualification periods and things like that. So, if anything, I would have just been like, stay healthier, because I had a peak period of a few months before, one of my injuries got really bad, where, I was almost unbeatable. I had just I won zonals. I got third in this World Cup. I lost 15-14, really close bout. And, I was just fencing so well, and it was really hard to maintain that over the entire, season. So if there's one thing that, would have been nice about that, is just to be able to manage that stuff a little better. So I could have, felt good and not had to compromise more with the way I was competing over the season. But yeah, I really, my main goal was to come up with ideas, like rethink fencing, and have my own ideas, not just accept things that people say, but really think them through and say, does this make sense or not? Challenge those, that dogma, which I think is not always correct. Or if it is correct, it's often changed from the original reason into just a command, right? So the why isn't necessarily linked with the what. And so, when I approach the sport now, and why I think it's still interesting for me to be involved, it's because I I try to, help people with their own process and just try to shorten, their process to get to, what can be successful for them through my own experiences.
Reminds me a lot of our last guest a little bit.
In what way? The
Self-coach.
self-coach? Yeah. Yeah. No, I forgot about that piece of it.
Yeah.
Just coaching yourself, having those conversations, working. Roman said something similar, where
Another very successful
fencer. Yeah, no, he said something similar to where, like, these coaches were telling him things and he's like, I don't know what they said. Like when he won the Olympics, he said the guy said one thing in one of the bouts, like, you're a little too close. Or I forget what the phrase was. He's like, but that was the only thing that I took that day. And he said, you have to be your own coach. You have to sort of work through these issues yourself and come up with strategies. And that's where the improvement comes in. And in a way, like what you're saying with developing the process, right? It's not about taking in this word and then trying to produce a result out of it. It's figuring out and solving problems, making that part of a process. And if the process is good, then the results are secondary to that. Or
the results are the consequence, you could say, or something like that. Yeah. Obviously, they're important, and it's hard to, kind of de-link yourself from that. But they also, if you're too attached to them, they're going to kind of bring you out of, what matters, which is just fencing well. Fencing well, right? And if you fence well, then you'll hit. And then if you hit, then you'll get touches. And if you get enough touches, then you win. And if you do that enough times, then you're going to, win a tournament or something.
I really like that way of thinking too, because it's, it takes a lot of ownership of your experience and process to be able to believe in yourself in that process. There are so many people who fence without a coach, but I do not believe that any of them right now in the US that are doing it without a coach are truly training themselves. They're showing up and they're fencing. The closest that I can imagine is when, as of recent times, Dylan Nollner and James, when Aladar got too old to give them lessons, there was a period of time where Dylan made a senior team when he was self-coaching. And it's not like you're neglecting everything you've learned. You're actually taking from it and getting to the essence of what actually works with you from the things you've learned. And I think that's what you're touching on, right? You have so many, in many cases, inspirations. You've worked with all these different coaches at different points in time. I think a very special skill I would imagine that you have, that a lot of fencers probably struggle with, is understanding what you can take from each of those coaches that works for you. And that probably happened through a lot of trial and error and finding like the middle ground, right? Because you didn't spawn as just like a fencer. You learned over time. And I think that's truly the name of the game. And many fencers are scared to do that because there is an emotional component to working with a coach and this sort of, I don't know if it's loyalty or whatever it is, but that dynamic. And it's cool to see sort of like a, learning from this master, and you have the opportunity to engage with so many minds in the sport who have thought about it. You think about the amount of time that each one of those people has thought about it. It's like to the nth degree of however long that one person can think about it. And I think it's really special to take away from that. Another person who did that really well, not an epee actually, was Rayson Bowden. He worked with a lot of different coaches throughout his career and had a lot of, it wasn't the same way that you did. You ended up working just with yourself and making an Olympic team, which is incredible for the record. And I want to distinguish between those two. But it's still like this small pocket of individuals that have had, I don't know, the self, maybe it's maturity or self-awareness to be able to kind of navigate that space. It's really challenging, I'm sure.
It is hard. And I think another thing that was also, I think in my case it worked out, but in a lot of other cases it doesn't, was to kind of have this period. So it wasn't continuous. But I've seen a lot of fencers who, are on a team and, they make an Olympic team or they come close to an Olympic team and then they sort of like, all right, well, that was that. And then they feel like they want to go for it again, but maybe a cycle later. And I can't think of one that has qualified doing it that way. but I know a few who have tried. And I think the main thing is that fencing changes a lot. You change a lot. It's just not the same when you come back after a period in that way. And I've actually done it a couple times, and I was very different each time. The way I fence was very different each time. And I think being open to that and just realizing that that was the case, and I had to just do things the way I could do them, or at that in the new moment, rather than just repeat what I had been told in the past. And that's the case with just being coached in general. Obviously, every coach is going to do the best that they can, but they're not inside of you. They're not able to do anything really for you. I think it's a fallacy for the athlete and the coach to, think too much about that, right? Or give too much belief that can happen, that, a coach can just sort of, program a fencer and then just like unleash them on the competition, and that's going to take them very far. I think in youth events and young age group and stuff, but when you get to the high international level, it's not going to work that way. The athlete has to take a lot of ownership over what they do and help the coach them, and they also have to fill in a lot of the gaps. It's just not possible for a single person to give everything to an athlete that they need to succeed at that level. And even those who are coached by the best coaches have a lot of like individual expression in their fencing and a lot of individual capabilities that they bring that a coach, isn't able to just hand to them, for sure. So, that's important. I think I did always have that mindset because of some of the coaches that I had when I was young. And I was fortunate in that way, rather than saying, just do what the coach says and you'll be fine. They said, you need to take ownership of what you do. And that was actually the pentathlete coach that I had, so she was probably, from a fencing perspective, one of the, least experienced coaches I'd had, but from an athletic perspective, she was, really, really high level, and she had, come through all of these different sports and training, and she never treated me like a little kid. And she said, you have to have a lot of self-reliance and you have to go do this stuff. So any coaches who kind of really would push, a hierarchy where it's like, do it only the way I said and everything else is wrong, I just have a huge distrust of that. And, we can point to examples of fencers who win doing things all sorts of different ways. So it's just clear that it's not only one way to be successful. So I think it's always important to kind of challenge that stuff. And unless I understand kind of the why of something, then, it's not going to work out for me to just follow, let's say. So a lot of the things I took from the coaches who I worked with, sometimes it wasn't even the way they did it. It was just sort of like, why would anyone do it this way? And sometimes it's they shouldn't, and it's sort of like, well, it's interesting that other people do. Maybe I can use that when I fence people who are trained in this way. So it's almost, in some cases, it would be a rejection of what they were teaching me, but it was super useful because it would inform how I would approach fencing.
Scouting.
Something like that. It'd be like, oh, this is how, so many people are trained. Now it makes sense, but I don't want to fall into that trap, but I can, use it in different ways. So yeah, the experience was really variable. And, the most interesting experiences I had being coached were when the coaches were very thoughtful, could explain, in like super detail what was going on. And then, I could take that and maybe push it even like a level or two beyond. So there were certain examples of that and kind of blend that all together. Sometimes it's maybe too complicated, but overall it was all right.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. So there's another piece of your career that I think is incredibly impressive, and you've sort of touched on it, and you touched on how sort of these nagging injuries and staying healthy was one thing that made it difficult for you to compete. But you went on to be competitive in more Olympic quads after 2012. And you had amazing longevity in your fencing career, at least by U.S. standards, I would say.
You helped qualify the Tokyo Olympic team.
Yeah.
I think it would have been all right without me, but yeah, I was involved.
You were in the kitchen.
So what was it at that point that kept you going? Like maybe it's, some sort of unfinished business at the Olympics but how did you continue for so long and how are you so successful at it, even with these nagging injuries that I'm assuming got worse over time? But what was sort of that latter piece of the career like?
So after 2012, I really did think that would be it. But I did not like the idea of the entire team turning over. And I did encourage both Seth and Ben to keep fencing, but they both didn't. And so we were number one in the world. We had just had all these successes, and we were really a phenomenal team. And there are so many aspects of team fencing that I think we really honed together. I think that's one reason why, Seth is so involved now, Cody's involved, I'm involved, is to try to, bring that way of thinking about team fencing to the team now, right? Because the sum of the parts can just be, so incredible as a group. And we had really achieved that. I mean, we were winning medals, like majority of the World Cups we were in. We won Worlds. It was just awesome. And it was a lot of fun to do that as a group. But thinking about, all four of us going, and basically all of that knowledge just, being a big hole that there really wasn't a place to fill. Also, Sebastian wasn't going to continue as the coach. So I would say I had some mixed feelings about, being the one who would try to do that. But, that was motivating. And it was an interesting season to have three new guys kind of come in, and it rotated a little bit. We were still fairly successful. And I think that it was interesting for me to take on a much more like active, guidance kind of coaching. At a certain point, there was just not really a great, plan for each of the 9 encounters. I would say I felt good about my own because they were the same as they would have been if anyone else had been on the team or they were before. But the other guys needed to figure out what they were doing. So I would just be always talking to them, here's who's up next. I'm spending time with them. This is what the bout's going to be like. This is how you need to approach it. Then they get off the strip, talk to them a little bit, and the next person coming up. So it was just like this whole process. And that was, pretty fun to have a new challenge, and it worked out pretty well. I mean, we finished the year, I think, second in the world. So, we did drop a little bit, and then we didn't, obviously repeat as world championships as champions, and we fell down, but we did get a couple medals and other good results through that season. So that was really a key reason. I think if the other guys had said, we're all continuing, I don't know that I would have, honestly. And I didn't really have a big objective for 2016. I was kind of considering other, things professionally, and ended up applying for and going to grad school. And I didn't want to be in grad school. I wanted to immerse myself in that experience. I wanted to learn there. I wanted to do the things that, you do in business school, and not just constantly be competing in competitions and gone every weekend like I had been in college at certain times and things like that. So I was only partially in for that cycle, and it is, I think, a bit of a bummer what happened. The guys, for the most part, were really involved in the in the Olympic Training Center. They were resident athletes out there. It was, I was trying to be very involved in the competitions I was asked at, but then they were doing something completely different, and we weren't really together very much. They weren't coming to New York a whole lot. I wasn't really able to go there. And so it was a bit fractured, I think, the approach. And ultimately, that program got shut down, and they kind of all came to New York. And so I really think that, it would have been interesting if they had been in New York a little more. We probably could have trained together, and maybe like the preparation around that and qualification for 16 might have been a bit better, but it just didn't, turn out that way. So I didn't, I would say, really go for it. So I was involved in it some, but it didn't kind of match up for me to do a whole lot more. And then, I got my MBA and I sort of switched gears professionally, was doing some new things that were really interesting, had new challenges with that. And I was not really training or competing much at that time. And I was not thinking about the Tokyo Games, obviously, that were scheduled for 2020 and wound up being in 2021. But I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2018, and my parents were going to come out for that. It was in St. Louis at Summer Nationals, and I thought, hey, I'll compete in this competition because that'll be cool. They haven't seen me fence in a long time. I'll do the individual. We'll do the team event. Be out there for a few days, and I won the individual, and I actually fenced pretty well. It was pretty fun, and we went team. So it was like a good couple days. And so I was like, well, my ranking's decent again. If I get another result, like I'm basically, who knows? And we're getting close to how things will sort of shape up. If I go for, train a little bit and go for some competitions, it'll be like a 15-month thing or something. Like it's pretty short, like I could kind of dig in for that and see. And it kind of went up and down. I would say I had a couple more all right results, but it was really hard to manage. I was much more focused on work than fencing, so I would just sort of jump in and out of the fencing and see what would happen. And so I wasn't ranked in the top 12 for when the first international qualifier, which I think was the Monal in 2019, happened. So I don't know. I didn't even register for it. And I was like, all right, well, that was a fun 6 months between Summer Nationals and the competitions I did. And now it's spring of 2019, qualification period started. Like I'm not ranked super high. That's fine. I kind of care more about work and following up, what I'm doing with my MBA and stuff anyway. And then a few months passed and the first domestic qualifier was going to happen in October of that year. I didn't register. And then I was like, oh, I'd like to go. So I actually petitioned.
This for Kansas City in October 2019.
Yeah, wherever that one was.
You petitioned to get into
I petitioned, and apparently there was like a high performance committee or something, and they let me fence it. But it was a 2-day format at that time. They said you basically come in with no ranking. You don't even though you're, I don't know, whatever. I was like 14th in the U.S. Like you have to come through the first day. And
you and Valentin Matveev.
And then I did, and then I got second in that one. Yeah. And
Yacer won, yeah?
Yeah. I was like really tired. I was like, why am I so tired? And then I thought about it later, I had to fence 2 days in a row. So I was pretty old. I wasn't fencing a lot at that time.
You're 39?
Like I was younger. Yeah. 38.
38.
And
that's not talked about enough.
Yeah. So, and then the next one, then I registered and I won that one.
Yeah, that's Salt Lake City.
Yeah. And so then I was suddenly on the team. I was like, well, it's, the guys aren't getting international results too much and their domestics are kind of mixed. And so now I'm in the 4. And I was like, well, we'll see, and I'm in the 4. I guess I got to, try for Tokyo. At least it's only going to be, whatever, a year, and then I'll know what happens. I think if it would have been 2 years, I don't know, because it was just a lot to deal with. But it was unexpected to have all that happen. Mm-hmm. I went to some World Cups. I was all right, but I had no ranking. I don't know. It was just like a whole thing. It was a little bit of a surprise to find myself in that cycle in that way. And I think there were some issues with just the team at that time. It was a little hard to kind of jump in late. And some people definitely didn't want me on the team. So it was a little hard to, bring what I would have liked to do, which is the experience we had as a successful team. Like people just didn't really want to listen, so, it was hard for me to connect and maybe make a contribution to the team at that time. And, we weren't doing great, I think, in the team events. Fortunately, the Western Hemisphere was pretty weak. So, the qualification happened anyway, but it was just a weird year. And I think the coaches were having a hard time with it, and the athletes were having a hard time with it. So I would have liked to see. I think that was a very talented team. Actually, they could have done a lot of stuff. I mean, they were toe in toe with Japan, and Japan barely beat them. They kind of came back in the middle, and then they won the gold medal. I mean, there's no question in my mind that the U.S. team that year had the ability to win a medal or even the gold medal. But my experience with the team was sort of like just a part of that.
Yeah.
That cycle. And it was a little bit of a surprise to jump in there. And then I would have been like a 40-year-old there. And, I fenced all right. I mean, and everything, but I had opportunities. I lost a couple of bouts at World Cups 15, 14. I think there were at least 2. If I had won, I probably would have been the 4th person on that team. So, it was close, but it was, hard to prepare for that level all the time and everything. It was just like a whole different thing. But, I'm happy with it, and it was a fun thing to be involved with. And at that point, again, I mentioned before, fencing was just much more about a process for me, and it was interesting to have new challenges. And really, my strength was my mind, and that had been developed over a lot of years of competing and going through a lot of tough things and a lot of successes as well. So it was interesting to find new ways to apply that, in World Cups and in the U.S. tournaments.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask one?
No.
So with that in mind, you touched on a lot of really important things, and you talked about it in your experience with your team success that was built from the early ages of, the early days, I guess would be a better way to say it, of Team World Cup fencing, and really getting a lot of reps in that team event, and just seeing how a good team is built, a successful team is built as a sum of all of its parts being greater than just the sum of all of its parts, right? And how everyone can play a role and lean on each other and be accountable and do the right thing, essentially. And you've been a part of the process for teams that were less successful. And it really, all of it led you to today. Naturally, you just kept waking up, and here you are. But you're now involved in yet another team. And we are by no means a team that pulls strong results right now as the U.S. men's epee team. But it's a team that's really working from a lot of different angles, a lot of resources from these great days of the U.S. men's epee team are working together to put us in a better situation. And a lot of the athletes, I think, are trying to find a way to meet in the middle so we can work there. I definitely feel that we're not there yet as a team, but I feel that we're pushing towards it. And I guess the question that I have is based off your experience from sort of the whole spectrum of what a team could be, what a team is, and what makes a successful team. What are your thoughts on our current process, prospects? And this could be filtered, unfiltered, we can cut it if you don't like it later. But what are your thoughts on the U.S. men's epee team based off of your experience with so many different types of teams in your career?
Well, it is true. I have had a lot of team experience, and not all of it has been successful. There's no question, but certainly a lot of learnings and different things which were really interesting and kind of informed. And I think I can fairly successfully understand where everybody's coming from, because I've kind of been through so much. I'll just share, as a very young fencer in Southern California, my first teams at the U.S., high U.S. level, national championships and stuff, were me, Gago Demirchin, and Franco Cerruti. who a lot of people know as coaches now. They were still fencing really well. They were older, and I was like, 16, 17, and we made a team, and we would win medals like every national championships. The only team we lost to ever was the New York Athletic Club, and they had multiple Olympians on their team and stuff like that. And at that point, I was just sort of like hook up and just try to win. Like very straightforward. Very little tactics and things like that, and carried that over to first. Actually, even junior world championships didn't have team events like they do now until the first ones that I made. So Seth, Jan, and I were the first team to win a medal at junior world championships. We got third at junior world championships in 1998, I think. And we beat Italy like really badly. We fenced super well. They had a couple top guys on that team later, like really good seniors. And that was the same thing. It's just like if everybody's hot at the same time, we just like steamroll people. And if it doesn't work out that way, we lose. And this just variability is kind of what I see in the team now a little bit. And one of the main learnings, and I think it was a little easier to do it because of the passivity rules and stuff like that we had later, was just how you could manage your encounters. And when you have a team that really trusts each other and knows each other, like we ultimately had with Seth, Cody, myself, and other guys, but we were really the core of the team for over a decade. It's just so easy to pass a score off, and you stop worrying about your individual, plus minus in an encounter, feeling like you let the team down if you were negative, or you have to make up touches because your previous encounter was negative, so you have to get to even or positive, so you have to do too much in the next one. These are the type of things that I remember feeling and being a part of teams and not really going that great. Or needing my teammates to sort of save me after I would make those kind of mistakes, or they probably made them too back in the day, where ultimately it's like, hey, you do your job. You can kind of define what that job is with your teammates. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes you're more successful in doing your job than others. Sometimes your job is really varied. Sometimes it's to give your teammate a very high ceiling, so it's to kind of contain the other person. Sometimes what the style is of another fencer, so you're more about shutting them down rather than beating them. Sometimes it's the opposite, where you have a mismatch and other fencers, your teammates coming up don't have a great feeling about what their encounters are going to be, so you're going to kind of save them by like trying to obliterate the guy you got in front of you. So it's a job though, and you define that, and you develop ways to do those jobs. And I think I was pretty effective at, a lot of those different roles. But all of us were in different ways because we were, really good team fencers and we trusted each other. So I think that some aspects of that are still missing. And I think that it is not an easy thing to communicate in words. So Seth and I can, and Cody and others can say these things, but it is really hard to internalize that stuff. The sport is very complicated. Certainly other things in the sport are very hard to just explain in words, right? You really have to kind of live it and get it. And, we can say things multiple times in different ways. We can try to illustrate them with drills and stuff like that. And we understand that it just doesn't, click automatically, right? You kind of have to go through it. So I think that there's a massive amount of potential on the team. So that's good. Sometimes you have a, group of people trying to compete, and it's just hard to imagine them maybe getting the results that they want. Everybody wants to win and, win medals at the international level or something like that. I totally see that being a possibility with many combinations of the groups that we have now. We have so many good fencers, so many people with a lot of potential. But yeah, it's a process to get through there. You know, we can do it, and everybody's working hard. But I think having more experience together will help. So we've had some camps and clinics. Some people kind of get in and out of those. I think more reps like that stuff will help. I am disappointed to see kind of fewer team matches and less emphasis on team fencing at national championships. I think it was the first time maybe in history that we didn't have a team event for the at national championships where all these people would compete in it. I'm seeing also, more emphasis on bringing all the national team together as like a composite team to just kind of clobber everyone else, which is what the women were doing. I don't think that really is helpful. I think competing, beside your teammates that aren't always the best and just having really difficult team matches, whatever they are, was actually more helpful for me developing as a team fencer than, just having a team that was super strong that no one really could compete with at nationals, which sometimes we were that strong. But anyway, that's what I think. I think we need to collectively feel, and maybe the other weapons don't feel that way, so they're not really supporting that. And so, men's epee is kind of alone and seeking that. But that's something that was really helpful for all of us. I don't really see it right now. So that's just kind of at an institutional level, I think would be better to see how our tournament structure could help the group do that. And then, more reps as a group and, more different, challenges in the camps and things like that can bring people around and kind of up that experience level so that people are just really comfortable in the situations that present themselves in team matches.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was really
that was a great answer.
Good game plan for moving forward. And it's interesting. I didn't fully conceptualize how impactful the role, like playing a role, doing your job, how impactful that piece was for the success of the junior team when I was going through it. Because Sebastian was partially involved and he tried to bring all these sort of things that he'd worked on with you guys. And so I think, we didn't do it exactly the same, but just having those predetermined jobs and like a plan moving into the bout, that really simplified things. And I think it really led to our eventual success as a junior team. And then just the complete abandonment of that as a senior. That was something that in the moment I was like, yeah, that's for kids. I did that as a junior, so it was for juniors, right? It's not for seniors. But now I'm thinking back to no, that actually it helped reframe team training. It helped, in a way, it helped me work on specific things because, you're now, I say fencing is like a character of myself, right? Just focusing on this one thing and having to be uncomfortable and just doing fencing this one way. But doing that sort of helped me solve other things in individual matches, right? Where you see a pattern for how you have to fence this bout, and you can sort of, not saying you have to live and die by the strategy in individual, but you can run up the score pretty well. So yeah, I do miss that piece of it. It made the team events a lot more fun. I think it's beneficial for all fencing. So I hope there is an emphasis more on this piece going forward.
That's on us, dude. We can practice like that any day of the week.
I think we should practice like that.
Yeah.
That's a side.
Seems.
That's an aside.
Friday, I think so too.
Friday morning 2v2s.
That's what it
Not
is.
a bad
Yeah,
idea.
There's all sorts of drills, and those came in. We had different coaches who brought different things. We've kind of come up with some of our own stuff as well. But I think you have both participated obviously in the camps, and it's primarily situational fencing. And that's really what matters in competing, and especially in the team event. I think it's more, it's very rare in team fencing that you actually get completely just unleashed and just do whatever you want at its best. That happens primarily in the last bout. when you just have to, like whatever it is, right? You're up, down, the time's running out, and it's just like a total like battle between those two guys to finish off the match. One guy might be holding off the other one, or maybe they're just, basically neck and neck and jockeying for like some small advantage until it winds up in priority or what have you. But other than that, there's a lot of restraints that go on the athletes. And so a lot of it is just what you don't do, because it's really hard in a preliminary bout to do something so important that it results in the win. It's basically impossible. Maybe theoretically there's a situation where there's a few low scoring bouts in a row, you get up there and you've got like a 15 touch ceiling and you beat a guy, 20-3, and now you just won it for your team. But is that going to happen against a good team? It just isn't going to happen. So sometimes people have this like dream that that's going to be the case, but it's just really rare. And that's not, what happens. If you're up one, down two, if you're just a really, really tenacious, tough fencer, you do your job and you don't give up a lot, you're giving your teammate a chance to carry that forward until the guy at the end, can win the bout. So that's really how most of them play out. And then if you do that enough times and the other team jumps too hard and they try to win it too early, you can kind of beat them down and run away with it. And that's really the pattern of the matches that we had when we were, the top ranked team in the world. And we consistently won, medals at the World Cups we were in, and we beat all the top teams. We lost matches too, but we had a really great record. It's just, you just don't give it away. And I do see that to some extent now. People are getting frustrated, trying to do too much, fencing kind of freely, the way they're approaching these matches, the way they do the individual bout. And it is difficult to explain why it's just not the same, but it is not the same. It's about doing your job and not stepping out of that too much. It's sort of your duty as a good teammate to, play your role and pass on to the next guy, and then the next guy and the next guy, and it'll come back around for you. And they did that for you. And so now you're in a situation to... It
takes a lot of humility and discipline and dedication towards that shared goal.
Yeah, it's all those things. Yeah, a lot of discipline. In some ways, it's not as fun or exciting, but in other ways, it's more fun and exciting because you just have a different challenge. And so I really enjoyed it. I think all of us enjoyed team fencing a lot for those parameters, right? You're working within a set of parameters rather than it being more open. And I think some people especially thrive in that. I think Cody's an example where, he was definitely one of the top fencers in the world for a long time. But individually, his results were not the best of his career, let's say in 2012. But some of the things he did as a team athlete were absolutely incredible and unquestionably one of the best in the world. And so he, that's great. He really embraced that and took home, his share of this historic result that we did, even though he probably would like to refence a lot of the individual bouts he had that season.
Yeah. Seth spoke really highly of him as a team fencer too, which is cool. Shout out Cody. Maybe we'll have you on someday, hopefully. Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, because we could keep going forever. Yeah. I want to pick your brain just for hours, and that definitely opens a door. And Steven and I have loved telling people, the next time we get you on, maybe we should just start having people on again. Like, why not? Fun. Why not? There's so many people to talk to, but so many people we could talk to more. So yeah, what's our last segment, Steven?
So Soren, our last segment, we call it one light answers. And as a former foil fencer, right, in order to get one light, it takes a little more than to get two lights. I mean, epee too, but two lights a little less of a big deal. So yeah, you got to be decisive, you got to be quick, and you got to just stick with your gut. So we're going to ask you rapid fire questions, and we want you to just take the first thing that comes to mind, just real confident, and let's hear it. Are you ready?
All right.
Take it away, Ari.
Who are your two favorite fencers?
I probably Seth and Cody. We were teammates for a long time, and I really respect their fencing, and we went to war together a lot of times, and it was great.
That's awesome. All right.
What was the favorite city you've ever been to for fencing?
Stockholm.
Okay. Oh, was there anything in your fencing bag that shouldn't have been? And what was it?
Don't think so. Yeah, I probably carried around a few too many tools that were heavy and stuff like that. But, yeah, don't think so.
Strong shoulders.
Yeah.
Did you always have such a large chest? Such a well-defined chest.
Muscular chest.
Not always, but I didn't always have a lot of teammates to train with, so I could hit the weight room and, train other physical capabilities that could help me on the strip.
This is a crazy one. If you could tear another major muscle smooth off, would you still pick your hamstring?
Definitely not.
And what muscle would you pick?
I don't know, a finger or something small.
On your left hand? All right.
If all your coaches fenced each other in their prime, who do you think would win?
Man, that would be awesome to see. I would love to see them fence in their prime, honestly. And I'll just name a few people who were incredible competitors and who I never got to see fence. Obviously, we didn't have video of back in the day, but Michael DeSaro was the youngest Sabre national champion ever when he won a long time ago in the 60s. But he was also accomplished epee fencer, I think a world military games champion, multiple-time Olympian. His coaching tree, let's say, is just incredible, especially American coaches that were sort of a new thing at that time. Hazeburo Okawa was just an incredible fencing mind, and I learned so much from him, not just the technique he taught, but the way to think about fencing. And he was unquestionably one of the most accomplished fencers in the world for, a 15-year period or so. He was primarily a foil fencer, but not rapid, but important. He told me once, he's like, "Oh, you're going to Poitiers. I won that World Cup." I'm like, "No, this is an epee event. What are you talking about?" Sure enough, name of winners. He went to train for foil in Paris, went down to Poitiers, won the epee World Cup, finalist at Heidenheim. Unbelievable. And
just for fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's just a total badass out there. Small guy, probably one of the smallest fencers. In the tournament, and beat all these epic European guys in tournaments like that in epee. So yeah, would have loved to see him compete. And Gago, who I did compete with and against, so I wasn't sort of far off his prime, but he wasn't even training, and he was just beating the crap out of people in tournaments. So yeah, he was just so tenacious. It was very interesting and also informative, right? You grew up fencing in the U.S. and people are like pretty nice, and over there they're just so tough. And he brought this mindset here, and that definitely helped me train and compete internationally. It wasn't as much of a surprise when you try to shift over to the international level. So yeah, that's just a few of the guys, but I worked with other people too, and. Yeah, I don't know who would win, but that would be a cool tournament to watch.
So Soren Studs contains 3 fencers at this moment, correct? Stephen Ewert, Justin
not
Yu.
my name, but yeah.
I came up with it. I'll own that one.
Stephen,
I fucking own it.
See, we brought it up on this podcast before. Yeah, welcome to the name, Soren Studs. That's not our question, though, but it contains 3 fencers at the moment. Stephen, Sean Strong, and Justin Yu, correct? Which member of Soren Studs do you think would win in a fist fight?
I might just give it to Sean for the sheer crazy factor. He just holds nothing back. So,
Shout out Sean. Challenge is on. All right.
Yeah, I like how you passed this one back to me. I thought Ari was going to get
I'll get the next
tough
one.
to ask questions.
No, I got a tough to ask question.
So, over the years, you've done a lot of fun photo shoots, like fencing adjacent photo shoots. Are there any full nude shoots floating somewhere out there?
No.
Would you do one today with Soren Studs?
I think that'd be a safe sport violation as just one reason that I would not.
Amongst many. Well, all right. Who do you think is the most underrated fencer on the senior men's epee world circuit?
I have no idea.
Good answer. Do you have the most overrated?
Also, no. I don't. study a lot of video and other fencers. I like, watching the tournaments, but there's just so many good fencers and there's so many ways to both win and lose. You see people fence great bouts and lose. You see people, fence great bouts and win against a great fencer who also fenced a great bout. Like, it's just the results and all that stuff. There's just so many good fencers. So it's always interesting. You always learn things watching, top people. But I also think that it's hard to, glean too much from just watching others do it. And it doesn't, really change dramatically my approach, like certainly a little bit. But yeah, there's just so many really strong fencers, and almost anyone at that level can beat anyone else on any given day. So, usually it's small factors that contribute to people being good. I have found it interesting just around kind of underrated some of the team results recently and the way some guys who maybe haven't had the top individual results have carried their teams to some surprise victories. I think Tristan Tulin did that in a couple team really interesting team matches recently, and that reminds me a little bit of what we did. We didn't have a collection of like the top guys always, but we would be really savvy with how we fence and all that. But that's specific to team maybe. But yeah, there's a lot of good guys out there, and I'm not at that many tournaments to form an opinion, let's say right now.
It's still a great answer.
Yeah.
And we got gold in there. All right, Steven.
Final question for the day. What is your favorite piece of pre-air equipment?
I really like their socks, actually. I know that's not like the most interesting thing, but yeah, I have a couple pairs of socks. I think they have great socks. And nothing's more important than footwork. So if you feel good in your shoes and you can move well, it's actually nothing else really matters. A lot of ways to hit people. If you can't move around, then it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
Pre-air socks, better footwork. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Well,
awesome. Well, Soren, thank you so much for taking the time out of the first nice day of the year to sit in this room with us and chat about fencing. It was great to just hear you go through the tale and rehash the career and hear more about some of the things we discuss regularly, but just hearing sort of the origins of that and how that informed other parts of your career. And I feel like I'm in good hands. I feel even more confident in that after this. But yeah,
I know we didn't get into your impression of these things. You have your own perspective.
Yeah.
This episode is about you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do a second one.
We'll flip the seats around.
Yeah. You can interview Steven. Yeah, seriously, that was awesome, Soren. I mean, it's always fun. I find myself getting into long conversations with you and always walking away feeling better for it. And thank you for just giving us more of your time and perspective. It's really healthy, and there's a lot in that Soren Thompson brain that we could all benefit from. And you've had a really, really unique and cool experience and journey through our sport that I think hopefully our viewers really enjoyed throughout this episode. If you made it this far, kudos to you. Yeah, just thank you. It's great, and getting a yes from you to be on this episode with us was awesome. And the episode didn't disappoint, at least us. And to an extent, that is the most important piece right now. we thought it was very worthy, and we'd do it again in a heartbeat. So seriously, thank you.
Sounds good. It was fun, and maybe we'll talk again sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, eventually. Talk to you when I talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Soren.
All right.
Cue the Direct Elimination theme song by Colin Campbell. Steven,
What's that?
I've been making some results lately that are just short of where I want to be. And, I realized that since I've been edging myself so hard, I might as well just use edge to help me get an edge so that I will climb over that edge and be exactly where I'm trying to be in my results. Confident that my feet aren't slipping on the ground and that my shoes have the traction that they deserve. So go and buy yourself some Edge using code ALLIN, that's ALL-IN, for a discount.
You know, Ari, it's been a while, and I think it's time that I told the viewers just how much I love Prier's glove. I think this is the best fencing glove on the market. It has my 100% endorsement. I love it, man. I really love fencing with this glove, and I think everybody should go. I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, am begging with you to go buy one of these gloves and try it for yourself. Shop Prier USA, link in bio. Without your support, we couldn't bring you episodes like this, so be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe, and check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.